Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going deep, really deep, into the world of jazz.
Ooh, exciting.
It is, right? And specifically, we're looking at how it became such a strong voice for social justice.
I love that connection, music, and social change.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff. And to guide us, we've got this really insightful article.
Oh, is this the one from Svasasha?
It is. It's called The Harmonious Struggle, Jazz and Its Role in Social Justice.
I was just reading that. So fascinating.
Right. And what we're going to try and unpack today is, how did jazz become such a powerful force, especially for Black communities?
A great question, especially given the history of jazz.
Absolutely. So the article kicks off with this story about Dave Brubeck.
Oh, the pianist.
Yep, Dave Brubeck. Back in 1960, he canceled his whole tour.
Wow. The whole thing. What happened?
Well, get this. Venues were giving him a hard time because of his bassist, Eugene Wright.
I have a feeling I know where this is going.
Yeah, Wright was Black, and some venues just wouldn't let him play.
It's crazy to think even someone as famous as Brubeck faced that kind of pushback.
I know, right? It makes you think, if that's happening to Brubeck, what were Black musicians going through every day?
Exactly. It's just a stark reminder of how much racism was baked into the music scene back then.
For sure. So right off the bat, we see jazz was never just music, you know?
Totally.
Yeah.
It was expression, resistance, a way for Black communities to connect in the face of, well, just awful treatment.
And the article talks about how music, particularly blues and jazz, became woven into the political consciousness of Black communities.
Right, like it gave them a way to share their stories, their frustrations, when society was trying to shut them out.
And as jazz evolved, it got even more pointed, more about pushing for change.
It became a form of protest, basically.
Exactly. And one of the most powerful examples the article gives is Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit.
Oh man, such a haunting song.
Right, it's about lynching. So heavy, so direct. You have to wonder what it took for Holiday to perform that, especially back then.
It was a huge risk, but it forced people to face the horror of racial violence in America.
Yeah, it wasn't just entertainment, it was a demand for justice. And Holiday wasn't alone.
Oh, so many others use their music this way.
The article mentions Charles Mingus wrote Fables of Faubus as a critique of Arkansas's governor who was all about segregation.
To really understand the weight of that, we need to talk about Jim Crow.
Yeah, good point. Those laws, that whole system, it's essential context.
Jim Crow was all about legalized segregation and discrimination everywhere. Schools, housing, you name it, the South was suffocating under it.
And Mingus is writing music that's directly challenging that power structure. It's incredible.
And the article talks about signifying how Black musicians embedded these coded messages in their music.
Like hitting meanings, right? Because speaking out directly could be dangerous.
Exactly. They might sing about something seemingly lighthearted, but it had this whole other layer of meaning about freedom, resistance.
So clever, using creativity to communicate under such pressure.
It allowed them to share information, dissent, build solidarity, all while seemingly just playing music.
Speaks volumes about their resilience, doesn't it?
For sure. And it wasn't always subtle. Some were very direct. John Coltrane's Alabama, for example, a response to that horrific church bombing in Birmingham.
And then there's Nina Simone, Mississippi, Goddamn. That became an anthem for the entire civil rights movement.
These songs, each in their own way, were cries of protest, capturing the pain, the anger, but also the determination of a community fighting for its rights.
Music going way beyond entertainment, becoming this powerful force for change.
Absolutely. And the article also brings up the role of integrated jazz clubs in the mid-20th century.
Oh, you mean where Black and white musicians could perform together and audiences of all races could enjoy the music?
Exactly. These clubs became symbols of equality, challenging segregation head-on. Places like the Village Vanguard, Newport Jazz Festival, they were groundbreaking.
It's crazy to think a jazz club could be seen as a symbol of resistance.
But they were. They offered this glimpse of a society where music transcended race, a microcosm of the world people hoped for.
So powerful, these shared spaces, fostering change. And the article specifically mentions Duke Ellington and Louis Armstrong, how they broke down racial barriers within the industry.
They were hugely successful, but never stopped fighting for equality.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder how they navigated that system.
Ellington's story especially stands out, right? He got famous playing at the Cotton Club in Harlem.
Oh, wow. But that was a whites-only venue, wasn't it?
It was. It's wild to think he's playing there, but at the same time, he's supporting the NAACP, fighting for equal rights.
Talk about a tightrope walk, using his platform for good, even within a system designed to exclude him.
The article mentions he even organized benefit concerts for the Scottsboro Boys. those young black men falsely accused of rape.
Shows how deeply he understood the power of music to go beyond just entertainment and make real social impact.
It's an amazing example of resilience, of black artists finding ways to resist, create, and fight for a better world, even within a system built to hold them back.
Absolutely. And the spirit of pushing boundaries wasn't limited to the U.S. jazz. Jazz traveled, went global. The article even talks about its journey to India.
Jazz in India. Now, that's a story I want to hear more about.
It's fascinating how a genre so rooted in the African-American experience resonated in such a different cultural context.
Right. I mean, how did that even happen?
Well, initially it was mostly foreign musicians playing in India, reflecting those colonial dynamics of the time.
So even in a new setting, those same hierarchies were present.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
But later, local talent started joining in, bringing their own interpretations, particularly Anglo-Indians.
So the story of jazz, even as it traveled the world, is still intertwined with race, identity, inclusion.
Exactly. And the article highlights two prominent black musicians in India, Teddy Weatherford and Roy Butler, key figures in introducing jazz to Indian audiences.
I'd love to know more about their experiences, how their music was received, the cultural exchanges that happened, how jazz evolved as it met Indian musical traditions,
It's a really cool story. I think you'll be surprised by how much jazz changed and how much it changed the music scene in India, too.
Okay, now I'm even more intrigued. Let's dive into that right after the break.
So like you were saying, how did jazz actually make its way into the Indian music scene? It was really fascinating, not just a straight copy-paste.
Yeah, I was thinking there's got to be more to it than just American music landing in India.
Right. Weatherford, he was really something else. He didn't just play jazz, he kind of immersed himself in Indian music.
Wow, so he was actually collaborating, blending styles.
Totally. He would use Indian instruments, even scales, weaving them into his jazz performances.
So a real fusion was happening, not just playing American jazz for an Indian audience.
Exactly. And that speaks to what jazz is all about,
Mhm.
Adaptability, improvisation. It's not a rigid thing.
Right, that freedom to experiment, blend, create something new while honoring tradition, that's core to jazz.
And I bet that resonated with Indian audiences, especially during a time when India was pushing for independence from colonial rule.
Ooh, interesting connection. The article didn't go deep on that, but it does make you think, could those early jazz performances have played a role, even indirectly, in India's independence movement?
It's definitely food for thought. Imagine hearing this music, all about freedom, breaking free from structures, at a time when India was fighting for its own autonomy. Pretty powerful, right?
For sure, it adds a whole other layer to this story of jazz's global impact.
Reminds us that art's influence can be so unpredictable, reaching places and people in ways we don't always expect.
But going back to those early performances in India, the article mentioned they weren't exactly inclusive at first, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, it was a reflection of those times only foreign musicians were allowed to perform initially.
Man, it seems like even within a genre that's all about freedom and equality, those same inequalities still crept in.
It's a tough lesson, Progress isn't always a straight line. Even movements with the best intentions can end up mirroring the very systems they're trying to challenge.
So true. It's a reminder to always be critical, to keep pushing for inclusion, even in spaces that seem progressive on the surface.
Exactly. We've got to apply that lens today, too, in every aspect of society, especially the arts.
Definitely. So taking a step back, after this deep dive into jazz and social justice, what are some of the biggest takeaways for you?
Well, for me, it's just so clear how jazz gave a voice to those who were silenced. A symbol of resistance and hope, not just in America, but globally.
And that legacy of jazz as a force for social change, it didn't end back then. It continues to inspire artists even today.
That's so important to remember. That spirit of jazz, that improvisational nature, pushing boundaries, it's alive and well. Musicians from all sorts of genres are drawing on that legacy to address today's social issues, advocating for equality, justice, human rights through their music.
So, what does this all mean for us today? What can we learn from this history, this connection between jazz and social justice?
I think it's a powerful reminder that art can be a catalyst for change. It can empower marginalized communities, challenge our thinking, inspire us to create a more just world.
And understanding the historical context is crucial, right? Jazz wasn't just notes and melodies. It was a reflection of a community fighting for its rights, its hopes, its very existence.
Absolutely. And this fight isn't over. We've made progress, but inequality and discrimination still exist everywhere. Jazz reminds us to never be complacent, to always use our voices, our talents, to fight for a better future.
That's a message that hits home. The article ends by asking how musicians today continue to use their art for social change. It's something we should all be thinking about, how music and social justice are still so intertwined.
It's a crucial question. And the answer is they're doing it all the time. From hip-hop to folk to electronic, artists are using their platforms to speak out against injustice, raise awareness, inspire action.
So that spirit of using music for good, it's like a thread running through the history of music, from jazz to today.
Totally. It goes beyond just the message in the music. It's how artists use their platforms to support social causes, organizations fighting for change, encourage fans to get involved.
It's that ripple effect. The music sparks the conversation, then it motivates people to actually do something.
Exactly. Think about the artists who speak out against racism, climate change, gender inequality. Their voices reach millions, especially young people who might be inspired to become more active citizens themselves.
Music is more than entertainment. It's a tool for change. And it's on all of us, listeners and citizens, to pay attention, engage those messages, and find ways to contribute to making the world a better place.
Well said. That's the key takeaway here.
Yeah.
The connection between music and social justice is constantly evolving. It's a story that's still unfolding, and we're all part of writing the next chapter.
Love that. So to everyone listening, next time you put on some music, choose something that speaks to your soul, something that makes you think, something that motivates you to make a difference, because even one song can spark a change within you that ripples out and impacts the world around you.
And maybe you'll even be inspired to create something yourself. Write a song, pick up an instrument, use your own voice to make a difference. Because as we've learned from jazz, music can change hearts, minds, and ultimately, it can change the world.
So true. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of jazz and social justice. It's been an incredible journey.
It really has. And we hope you'll continue exploring this connection because it's a powerful reminder of the potential for music to be a force for good in the world.
Absolutely. So until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep making a difference.
It really is amazing how jazz traveled all the way to India.
Right. And it wasn't just a one-way thing. It's not like Indian musicians just started playing American jazz note for note.
No, it was much more dynamic than that. They really embraced those improvisational aspects of jazz.
Yeah, that spirit of experimentation. Right. So what happened when jazz met traditional Indian music?
Well, it's not like a brand new genre popped up overnight. But there was this really cool mixing of elements.
Like what kind of mixing? Can you give an example?
Think about Weatherford again. He was really key here. He was known for incorporating Indian instruments into his jazz sets.
No way. So like sitars and tablas alongside saxophones and trumpets.
You got it. And it wasn't just instrumentation, he also played around with scales, finding ways to blend Indian musical ideas into jazz harmonies.
That's so cool. I bet that created a sound that was both familiar and completely new at the same time.
Exactly. Some musicians were all about creating that fusion, that hybrid sound, while others focus more on adapting their existing jazz to Indian audiences.
Makes sense, like maybe incorporating some popular Indian melodies or rhythms into their jazz performances.
Right. It was all about finding that sweet spot, connecting with the listeners, while staying true to the spirit of jazz.
I wonder how that went over with audiences. Were people into it?
You know, like anytime you mix cultures, there are going to be some who prefer things to stay separate. But overall, it seems like jazz was pretty well received in India.
Especially, I'd imagine, by those who were open to new sounds, new ideas, which is kind of fitting given what was going on in India at the time.
Totally. A country on the verge of independence, embracing a musical form that's all about pushing boundaries, breaking free from the old ways.
It makes you wonder, did that exchange have any lasting impact on Indian music itself? Did Indian musicians start incorporating elements of jazz into their own work?
It's definitely something worth looking into further here. Jazz had a huge influence on so many genres worldwide, so it's not hard to imagine Indian musicians being inspired by it too.
So jazz is a voice for social change within Black communities in America, but then its journey to India shows this whole other side of cultural exchange and evolution.
For sure. It highlights music's power to connect people across borders, cultures, to spark creativity and dialogue in unexpected ways.
And it brings us back to that big question. How are musicians today using their art to address social issues? We've seen how jazz was a catalyst for change. What echoes of that do we see in contemporary music?
Oh, tons. Look at artists speaking out against injustice, raising awareness about climate change, advocating for LGBTQ+ rights. Music is still a platform for social commentary and change.
It's true, and it's happening across genres, hip-hop, pop, folk, you name it. That legacy of music as a force for good, which is so central to jazz history, it's still going strong.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the message in the song itself. It's artists using their platforms to amplify causes, support organizations, encourage their fans to get involved.
So it's about creating that ripple effect, music sparking the conversation, then inspiring people to take action.
Right. Think about the artists who speak out against things like police brutality or who raise funds for disaster relief. Their voices reach so many people, especially younger generations who might be inspired to become more active citizens.
It's a reminder that music isn't just something to listen to. It can be a real force for good. And we all have a role to play as listeners, as citizens, to engage with those messages and find ways to make the world a better place.
Couldn't have said it better myself. The relationship between music and social justice is constantly evolving, and we're all part of shaping where it goes next.
Love that. So to everyone listening, next time you're choosing music, pick something that moves you, that inspires you, that makes you want to make a difference in the world, because even one song can create a ripple effect, starting with a change within you and spreading outward.
And maybe you'll be inspired to create something yourself, to find your own voice and use it to make the world a more just and beautiful place. Because what we've learned from jazz is that music's power to inspire change is truly amazing.
Beautifully said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of jazz and social justice. It's been a truly insightful and inspiring journey.
It really has. And we hope you'll keep exploring this connection because music has the power to move us, connect us, and ultimately help us build a better world together.
That's what it's all about. So until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep making a difference.